Yeah, there's definitely a bit of both. There were quite a few players that got caught offsides with having sold calls or being short gamma and things like that. So I've been seeing a lot of the rumors and analysis around some of those dynamics at play. But this happens over and over and over again, and obviously the root cause is occasionally Bitcoin moves up, and sometimes it moves up rather violently on news or expectations of news. And when a lot of traders are caught off sides, that tends to fuel these very fast price movements.
And Cory, there's a lot of enthusiasm from crypto fans about the SEC possibly approving a spot Bitcoin ETF. Bottom line, Cory, do you think the SEC is going to greenlight a spot Bitcoin ETF? And if so, Cory, when do you think they make that decision? Is that this year? Is it early next year? What do you think the timeline could be?
I do think it's pretty much an inevitability that it's going to happen, and that there'll be a batch of them at about the same time, and then they'll compete it out to see who becomes kind of, who's the Bitcoin version of the queues for S&P, for instance. So that's what they'll be spending into, these big companies with their listings. As far as timing, I have been handicapping it as, basically Q1, but it does seem like there is a smaller chance, obviously, of it happening sooner. I would place my bets on Q1 though.
And Cory, what effect, if and when these ETFs are approved? It's not as just that it creates the product and people invest in it, but one would have to think that these big firms are going to be trying to push clients into these products. I mean, what kind of effect do you expect?
That's right. Yeah. The biggest effect of the ETFs is going to be that the top of funnel for the investor class is going to change from something that is contra Bitcoin, which is all of the crypto scams and pump and dumps of the last 6 years, FTX and the like, and all these wannabe altcoins. That's generally what has gotten people into Bitcoin, because they've been able to print their own money and sell it with marketing and all this VC funding. And then it takes people a year or two often to wade through all of that false marketing noise and find out what really is the signal in the space, which is Bitcoin and Bitcoin only. And now you're going to see a new era where some of the most credible, some of the most well-funded, some of the most trusted brands in the world are going to be shouting from the rooftops with tens and maybe hundreds of millions of dollars of marketing expense, just talking about Bitcoin, and putting all of the Bitcoin authors and podcasters and executives out there at conferences and encouraging them to go speak on to their companies and to the investing public. And that top of funnel is going to be talking about Bitcoin, and that's going to get people through the early stages of their customer journey much, much, much faster toward understanding what Bitcoin is and how different Bitcoin is from the world of quote unquote crypto.
Well, Cory, by the same token, I mean, the SBF trial is still going on. Do you think that there will be sort of a public overhang from not just that, but some of the other frauds that there have been over the past couple of years, and that it's going to take some time to overcome some of that institutional and individual reluctance, perhaps linked to those incidents?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they had a dramatically negative effect on Bitcoin in the last bull market because they siphoned demand away with false promises, and frankly, just by stealing demand with fake yields and fake pump and dumps that were all sort of just Sam's fraud, essentially, allegedly, but probably certainly. So, I think that we'll see a very different dynamic play out, and it'll be fascinating because there have been so many people, myself included, that would assume that the percentage rises, sort of bull cycle to bull cycle would continue to diminish. But if we truly were chopped at the knees with the last Bitcoin bull market, which it certainly seems like we were, a lot of demand truly was siphoned away by these scams, and most of them are gone, or at least the investing public understands much better after having it drummed into their head the difference between Bitcoin and crypto scams over the last couple of years. There's a very good chance that we see, a pretty different looking bull market the next time it really gets in swing for Bitcoin.
And Cory, I want to get you out here on this. We had Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong on Yahoo Finance recently, talking to us about the market. And one point Armstrong made was he really feels like the U.S. is falling behind the rest of the world when it comes to just the regulatory front. I was just wondering if you agree with that, Cory, and if you think that's changing anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't agree with that at all. I think basically Brian wants to have his cake and eat it too. And I've said this many times before. He wants to have only his little corner of the financial universe to be regulated differently while continuing to allow multi-level marketing scams and Ponzi schemes, not be allowed, and penny stock operations with false promises and direct mail to your grandma's nursing home and all these kinds of things that are not allowed. And he wants that light not to be shined on his little corner. These are companies that create software and then market essentially a company performance linked token. It's nothing like Bitcoin. Everything from Ethereum on down, none of them are anything close to the way that Bitcoin operates as a truly decentralized network with a fair launch. These are just companies with kind of a new version of equity linked trading instrument that sometimes has value of some sort that's linked to company revenue in some way, but usually doesn't. And so they're just kind of like these meme tokens that won't hold value in the long run. And so, yeah, I think they're being regulated according to the laws on the books, and they're fighting it out. And the grand plan of Andreessen Horowitz, Coinbase, and the Ethereum Foundation and Consensus and all these guys has been to try to achieve a degree of regulatory capture, whether it's pushing this over to the CFTC with promises of extra fees and budget for that agency instead of the SEC, or there are numerous plans to try to start a new agency, or, as has been the case for the last 6 to 12 months, writing legislation and handing it over to the legislative aides of some of the reps and the congressmen and the senators, and trying to get them to write legislation and be crypto mouthpieces, essentially. So I think they've kind of bought their way to having a voice in Congress now, and we'll see if they achieve their goal of essentially not being regulated the same way as the rest of the financial industry. And then if they achieve that, we'll see what kind of knock-on effects that has for other areas with similarly shady practices in the rest of the financial industry, and whether they're able to follow suit and also get special favors.